chapter 7, verse 1. This is what the sovereign Yahweh showed me. And see, he was forming locust swarms at the beginning of the late crop. And see, it was the late crop after the mowings of the sovereign. So you see, once again, confirming what we were seeing in the previous chapter, and also what I mentioned regarding how this prophecy of Amos, the whole book, has to do with our time and with the book of Revelation. This is what the sovereign showed me. And see, he was forming locust swarms. As we know, in the fifth trumpet, there will be locusts coming out of the Abaddon, the abyss. He was forming locust swarms at the beginning of the late crop. And remember that there will be a harvest, Revelation 14. And it can be mentioned as the late crop in the sense that it is the end times. And see, it was the late crop after the mowings of the sovereign, the king. And it came to be when they had finished eating the grass of the land, that I said, O sovereign Yahweh, forgive, I pray. How does Yaakov survive, for he is small? Right? So the prophet prays for Israel. Yahweh mentioned Israel as Yaakov when he was mentioning the punishment in the previous chapter. So now the prophet refers to the land or the people in the same way. And it came to be when they had finished eating the grass of the land. So he saw the locusts eat everything. Like we see that there will be hunger, famine in the third seal, also the fourth, but the third will start it on Revelation 6. And it came to be when they had finished eating the grass of the land that I said, O sovereign Yahweh. Verse 2, that I said, Adoni Yahweh. Forgive, I pray. How does Yaakov survive? For he is small. So he is worried that Yaakov will not survive this, that he's seen. So he prays for Israel, which is part of what Yahweh wants from the prophet. Yahweh relented concerning this. It shall not be, said Yahweh. It shall not be, said Yahweh. This is what the sovereign Yahweh showed me. And see, the sovereign Yahweh was calling to contend by fire. And it consumed the great deep. And it did consume the portion. That is verse 4. Tehom, the great deep, which is a word used also for the Abaddon, or the bottomless pit, the great abyss, or abyss, as here Tehom Rabbah, the great deep, and did consume the portion. So this is what the sovereign Yahweh showed me. So it confirms, because the great deep will open in the fifth trumpet, and locust swarms will come out that will prepare the people for the harvest that happens in the end times, like a thief in the night, late crop. And the prophet is worried that Yaakov, the many, won't survive, because they will have to die in order to be resurrected. He is small in terms of compared to the other nations, right? Yaakov as a nation. And small when it comes to the many in power and strength, because they do not have the name of the Messiah, which is like being at war and not having the sword. For the sword is the word of Yahweh, right? The word of Yahweh is the name of the Messiah, Yahushua, as we see in Revelation 19:13. So this is what the sovereign Yahweh showed me. And see, the sovereign Yahweh was calling to contend by fire. Yahushua came as the water of life. And he said that he came to start a fire, because the last is the fire that wouldn't be able to fulfill the part that he has to fulfill if Mashiach had not come before as the water. So now he comes as the fire. And see, the sovereign Yahweh was calling to contend by fire, and it consumed the great deep, and indeed consumed the portion. And I said, oh, sovereign Yahweh, please stop. Oh, Adoni Yahweh, please stop. How does Jacob survive? For he is small. Yahweh relented concerning this. This shall not be either, said the sovereign Yahweh. This is what he showed me, and see, Yahweh stood on a wall made with a plumb line in his hand. Right? So he had a plumb line in his hand. That refers to the power to judge. Obviously, it refers to measure, right? To measure in the wall or that which you will build. But measuring is what you do when you judge. You measure the arguments to see which one fits with the truth. So this is what he showed me, and see, Yahweh stood on a wall. Let me see this, verse 7. This is what I saw. And behold, Adoni Nitzav, Adoni was standing al chomat, on a wall. Let me see something. Well, we could talk about chomat for a while regarding that being a wall. The last is connected to a wall. I mean, in the sense of the representation, right? What a wall represents, protection. So the last comes to protect the few by what he will do in Mashiach. This first letter is a fence or something that separates, just like a wall separates. So the word for wall starts with a wall, chet. Then the vav is a person or a nail, as in using nails to make the wall, or the wall that separates men. Then we have water, or Mashiach. And then we have the tav, which is the last letter of the alphabet. Like I said, the wall represents the last. So wall starts with wall and ends with the last. So the last will come to seal the chosen few of the end times with the teaching of the cross. All of that represented by the tav. The teaching of Mashiach, coming as the Son of Man, the Mashiach who was nailed, bringing the water of life as the Son of Man to separate the chosen few and protect them. So there's more that can be said. That was real quick, just to show why Adoni is standing on a wall, and he has in his hand the measuring, the plumb line, Anach. The nun is a letter that represents falling or dropping, just like the plumb line drops. The aleph is the first letter, as in Mashiach is the first, and the strength. So it is through the strength and the wisdom that Mashiach gives us that we are able to measure with our hand. For instance, and I say with the hand, or to fulfill a deed, because that letter is a kaf, the palm of the hand. So also anach, that right here, like if we add a yud, that would turn into anoki, which is I am. If we add a yud to anach, to the plumb line. And that's so amazing, because remember the letter yud? The letter yud is a hand, and he had a plumb line in his hand. So if this is a plumb line, if you add the hand, you are adding a yud. If you add the yud or yod, then you have anoki. Let me show that. Anach is what appears there, plumb line, right? But this kaf is this in this form because it is at the end of the word. If we were to continue, let's say, and I put the yud, which is the hand that is holding the plumb line. Remember that Yahushua would be the plumb line. Yahushua is the arm. Then comes the hand. The hand is holding the plumb line, like the last is bringing Mashiach, the teaching of Mashiach. So if we add the hand, which is the letter yud, it says vertical. For some reason, they translate it like that. And it doesn't say that it should be changed because this kaf shouldn't be like that. It should be like this. But you see how it still says vertical, right? To show that it is the same letter, just in case anybody that is hearing doesn't know anything of Hebrew. So this here is Anoki, which is actually which means I am. Sadly, this Hebrew is not the one of the Torah, so they do not get everything right. Anoki in the Torah appears as I am. So the plumb line and the hand, that is I am. So Yahweh is the one with the plumb line in the hand. I hope that was understood. I find it very interesting. So Amos already said, this is what the sovereign showed me and see once. This is what the sovereign showed me and see twice. Now this is what he showed me and see thrice. And then it doesn't say it. All right, so 3 times, we'll see if it says it once more, but 3 times, like the 3 days that Mashiach stayed in Sheol, like the 3 years that the witnesses will testify for. So this is what he showed me, and see, Yahweh stood on a wall made with a plumb line in his hand. And Yahweh said to me, Amos, what do you see? And I said, a plumb line. And Yahweh said, see, I am setting a plumb line in the midst of my people Israel. No longer do I pardon them. That is sad, obviously, because I will bring a lot of pain for the people who are not forgiven. Thankfully, we have Mashiach, but see, Mashiach came to give us forgiveness as the water. Now Amos is prophesying about the fire, and he mentions the opposite. Obviously, just like fire, the opposite of water, punishment, the opposite of forgiveness. So Mashiach brought forgiveness, and those who do not accept that forgiveness will have to go through punishment, through the fire. And that's why the last comes with the plumb line in his hand, because he comes to measure those who are fit to enter the kingdom. So also it's interesting that it says, in the midst of my people, setting a plumb line in the midst of my people Israel. Remember what we read in Deuteronomy 18:15. Yahweh your Elohim shall raise up for you a prophet like me, that is Moshe, from your midst, from your brothers. Listen to him. Yahweh your Elohim shall raise up for you a prophet like me from your midst. So a prophet like Moshe from the midst of the people of Israel. Yahushua is the Messiah, not the prophet like Moshe. He said it, scripture says it many times, although Christians teach otherwise. Christians, by not understanding the coming of the last, they mix everything, first and last, as first. So everything that has to do with the last, they say is the first. So they say that the witness like Moshe or the prophet like Moshe is the Messiah, even though they are different. The Messiah and the prophet are 2 different persons according to scriptures. And even the Yahudim who did not accept Mashiach, Yahushua as Mashiach, they did understand that there are 2 different ones. They are 2 different ones, one from Yehuda and one from Yosef. One the Messiah, one the prophet. So the prophet like Moshe is for the end times. Now it says here, Yahweh your Elohim shall raise up for you a prophet like me from your midst. from your brothers. Now we see here. And Yahweh said, see, I am setting a plumb line in the midst of my people Israel. No longer do I pardon them. So that's why he says here, from your brothers, listen to him. If you do not listen to him, then you won't receive pardon. Because he says, according to all you asked of Yahweh, your Elohim. Also, this is important. Let me see the word asked here, 16. Oh, you see, according to everything that you asked. This is amazing because we talk about it a lot. How in Malachi 3, Yahweh mentions that the one that you asked for is coming. And he says here, according to everything that you asked for. So, and well, just to show him, there are several words, of course, that could be used for that, but let me just make it. Well, let's go to Malachi 3 for a moment. And it says, see, I am sending my messenger, and he shall prepare the way before me. Then suddenly the sovereign you are seeking comes to his Heikal. So I know I talk about this verse a lot, but it is very important. And this that we just saw in this other chapter is interesting. Although, like I said, it is a different word used here. I mean, I mentioned that there are several words used for the same. In this verse is using a different word, but the word that is used in Deuteronomy is also used in several other places. One of those we read yesterday in the study, when we were talking about the desired of nations. So here we see, then, see, I am sending my messenger, and he shall prepare the way before me. That is Yahuhanan the Immerser, or John the Baptist. Then suddenly the sovereign you are seeking comes to his Heikal, that is Yahushua HaMashiach, came to his temple, his body. Even the Malach of the covenant, the second manifestation of Yahweh on this earth, right after Heikal. Let me see. And he says, Malach Haberit, and the Malach of the covenant, Asher Atem Hafeitzim. So Hafeitzim would be here, the word, when it says here, in whom you delight. So that's why is the word delight, because he's using this. But other translations, whom you seek, they say whom, whom you seek is right here. They say whom you desire. So it's a synonym. But like I said, there are other verses where this other word that appears here, Sha'alta, comes from Sha'al, which is to ask, which is where we get the word Shaul. Remember, Shaul was the name of Paulus, his Greek name. I mean, his Hebrew name was Shaul. His Hebrew name was Shaul. His Greek name was Paulus, or Paul, as people know him, because he represents the desired one, whom people asked for. So we see it here through this word. According to everything that they asked Yahweh, their mighty one, or your mighty one, in Horeb on the day of the congregation, etc., etc. So, going back here, and Yahweh said to me, Amos, what do you see? And I said, a plumb line. And Yahweh said, see, I am setting a plumb line in the midst of my people, Israel. No longer do I pardon them. Another connection with this and confirmation is in Revelation 11. Doesn't mention the plumb line itself, but something that has the same representation, the same symbolism, the same idea. And a reed like a measuring rod was given to me. Right? So a plumb line and a measuring rod. Like I mentioned, the plumb line was to measure. So a measuring rod is to measure. But this time is a rod, not a plumb line. And a reed like a measuring rod was given to me, and the messenger stood, saying, Rise and measure the dwelling place of Elohim and the slaughter place of those worshiping in it. But cast out the cord which is outside the dwelling place, and do not measure it, for it has been given to the nations, and they shall trample the set-apart city underfoot for 42 months, 3.5 years. And he talks about the two witnesses. So let me go back to Amos. See, I am setting a plumb line in the midst of my people Israel, and no longer do I pardon them. And the high places of Yitzhak shall be laid waste. And the high places of Yitzhak shall be laid waste. Mentions Yitzhak, not Israel, not Yehudah, at least in this case. Remember that Yitzhak represents Yahushua the first. Israel, the son of Yitzhak, represents the last, the witness like Moshe. And the high places of Yitzhak shall be laid waste, just like Yahushua is at the right hand of the Father in a high place, the highest place. But in the world, those who claim to worship him actually worship and name Jesus, and they make high places for that entity, which is a false Messiah, or the false Messiah, because it is a false name, has a false image, and a false doctrine. And the high places of Yitzhak shall be laid waste, and the set-apart places of Israel shall be destroyed. Remember that Yahweh told Abraham that his seed would be like the stars of the heavens and like the sand by the sea. Then Yahweh separates that promise in Yitzhak and Israel. To Yitzhak, he says, your children will be like the stars of the heavens, like the stars of the firmament. And to Jacob, he says, your children shall be like the sand by the sea, like the dust of the land. So one, Yitzhak represents the heavens. Jacob, Israel, represents the earth. Heavens and earth, first and last. That is why also it mentions here the high places of Yitzhak, the heavens, the set-apart places of Israel, the earth. Hope that's understood. In verse 9, Bamot, high places of Yishak. Interesting also that he mentions another letter for Yitzhak. In this case, it is not using the tzadeh, is using the letter shin. And they are putting the vowel point at the end, as in saying that it sounds like the S, not like the shin. So that's interesting because they're changing the name of Yitzhak, just like they changed the name of Yahushua the first. So like I was saying, this represents the fact that they changed his name and they changed him. They changed the doctrine. That's why their high places will be laid waste. How interesting that in this case, in this verse in Hebrew, the name Yitzhak is changed. One letter is different. So then mentioned Israel, they write the name the same. Now here, when it says Yitzhak, but with a shin, we could say Yesh Chok, which would mean there is a statute or there is a commandment. There is, and as we know, Yahushua came to fulfill the commandments. There is a commandment to confess his name, and that is what they don't do because they change his name, represented by the name Yitzhak here. And it says, Israel, the set-apart places of Israel shall be destroyed. Set-apart places, high places. So it mentions high place when mentioning Yitzhak as the first, set-apart places as the earth for Jacob. Then it says, set-apart places of Israel shall be destroyed, and I shall rise with the sword against the house of Jeroboam, or Yarubam. Remember that the sword of Yahweh is the word of Yahweh, and the word of Yahweh is the name of the Son, Yahushua HaMashiach, Revelation 19:13. So if he shall rise with the sword, that means the last with the first. The last using the teaching of the first, and obviously what he did to pay for our sins, in order to destroy Yaroboam, which is the king that brought falsehood to the people, the reason why they are being punished. And remember that? Well, let me go to the name for a moment. So Yaroboam, the people will contend. As we know, the people contended with Mashiach, they killed him. The people will contend with the two witnesses, and kill them. So the people will contend. Jeroboam. That is something that connects with our time and what will happen with the two witnesses, what happened with Mashiach. And like I said, he brought falsehood to the people of Israel. It says the first king of the northern kingdom of Israel, when the kingdom split at the death of Shlomo, and the 10 tribes split of Yehuda and Benjamin, and the kingdom under Shlomo's son Rehoboam, idolatry was introduced at the beginning of his reign. He introduced that idolatry. So Yahweh is angry at him and his people because he brought idolatry. He built a couple calves for people to go worship, like the calves mentioned in the previous chapter of Amos. So, and I shall rise with the sword against the house of Yaroboam. So he will rise, he will stand up in this reality, as Michael in Daniel 12:1, that he shall stand up. Let me see verse 9 again here. And I will raise up. But look at the verb that he's using. Kam, of kum, which is a verb used prophetically referring to the manifestation of the son of Joseph, mentioned also in this book, in the previous chapter, when he mentioned David and Joseph. So I shall raise up over the house of Yaroboam, Bechareb, with the sword. Obviously, one could say, and obviously, I mean, it's an interpretation as well, that Yahweh will make the enemies of Israel to come and destroy it. But he's talking about Jeroboam, so his descendants, not only physical descendants, if there are any still, but spiritual descendants, people who act the same, who are leaders, who are politicians, who are whatever they are in power, and they promote falsehood, promote idolatry, and anything else that leads people away from the Father. So he's saying that he will raise up with the verb that connects prophetically to the descendant of Joseph over the house of Jeroboam. Remember what Yahushua says in Revelation 2, verse 16. Look how it is talking, and let me go back a little bit. To the messenger of the assembly of Pergamos. Pergamos represents the Christian church. He who has the sharp two-edged sword. Pergamo means Bamot. Pergamos means high places. Bamot in Hebrew. And we just saw Yahweh mentioning that he would destroy the high places of Yitzhak and the set apart places of Jacob. So now we mentions to the messenger of the assembly of Bamot, of high places, right? He who has the sharp two-edged sword. He who has the sharp two-edged sword, right? It just mentioned that in Amos, that he would raise up with the sword to destroy the high places. But that's not everything. If we continue to read, we see that he says, verse 16, repent, or else I shall come to you. So he actually is coming in person, not sending somebody, not doing it through somebody else. No, he's coming himself. Or else I shall come to you. And people think in Christianity that he's coming just to pick up everybody in the rapture so nobody will see him. Others think that some will see him during the rapture. Others think that he will appear until the war of Har-Megiddo. But here he's saying that he's going to come before that, and people won't even see him because he comes as a thief in the night. He says, Repent, or else I shall come to you speedily. This is also amazing. And I hope I remember several details that we've seen tonight for future reference and also even for the book. Because I would like to mention a couple more things in the book about this. Because remember that Boaz, I just mentioned Yakin earlier. Yakin is one of the two pillars. Yakin and Boaz, the two pillars at the entrance of the temple, they represent the first and the last. Yakin is he who established, or he shall establish. Mashiach established the kingdom already when he came, Yakin. But then comes Boaz, which means speedily, because he will do everything speedily. Also, it could be translated as with strength, Beos. But Boaz as a word is speedily. So repent, or else I shall come to you speedily. Repent, or else I shall come to you as Boaz, right? As the other pillar, speedily, and fight against them, against the false teachers, against the leaders of the people. I shall fight against them with the sword. So he comes with the sword, like he just said in Amos, but it is the sword of his mouth, the true teaching, the confessing of the name of Mashiach, Yahushua. So he comes speedily, going back to Amos. And the high places of Yitzhak shall be laid waste, Bamot, Pergamos, and the set apart places of Israel shall be destroyed. And I shall rise with the sword against the house of Jeroboam, those who teach idolatry, their congregation, their church, with the sword of his mouth, because he shall rise and come. Then Amaziah, the priest of Bethel, sent to Jeroboam, sovereign of Israel, saying, Amos has conspired against you in the midst of the house of Israel. The land is not able to endure all his words. So Yahweh gives a prophecy to Amos, and instead of repenting, instead of seeking Yahweh, they will want to destroy Amos, just like they will want to destroy the two witnesses. Look how Bethel is mentioned, which means house of the mighty one, as in those who have power over the church of the world, the churches of the world. Also, remember that Bethel is connected to the death of the two witnesses, at least the name regarding what we read in scriptures regarding the death of the two witnesses. Bethel appears a lot, not necessarily that they will be killed in the Bethel geographically, but in the Bethel spiritually. Spiritually, the house of the mighty one was in Jerusalem. So, meaning, well, actually, the physical temple was in Jerusalem. The physical temple was a house for the mighty one, therefore a Bethel. Then Amaziah, the priest. So you see the priest, he went with the word. So he appears as the false prophet, an evil priest. Let me see this verse real quick. Here in concordance, the name Amaziah, Yahweh is mighty, whom Yahweh has strengthened. Then Amaziah, the priest of Bethel, sent to Jeroboam, sovereign of Israel, saying, Amos has conspired against you in the midst of the house of Israel. You see how interesting, because Yahweh said here, see, I am setting a plumb line in the midst of my people Israel. Yahweh is asking Amos, what do you see? Amos said a plumb line, and Yahweh said, see, I am setting a plumb line in the midst of my people Israel. No longer do I pardon them. Remember I said how this represents, when it comes to the end times, the last, the witness like Moshe. Now we see that when they go, Amaziah as the false prophet, to Bethel, to tell the king of the time, which would represent the beast, the world leader, Jeroboam here, sovereign of Israel, saying Amos has conspired. They will claim the two witnesses will conspire. So Amos represents the last. For look what it says. against you in the midst of the house of Israel. Yahweh said, I will raise up a plumb line in the midst of the house of Israel. So that plumb line was represented by Amos, as we see here in this verse when he was accused before the king. Amos has conspired against you in the midst of the house of Israel. So that's what they will say to the beast in a way. The land is not able to endure all his words. Look at this verse here, 10. Amaziah, the priest of Bethel, said to Jeroboam, king of Israel, saying, Amos has conspired against you in the midst of the house of Israel. The land is not able to bear all his words. Okay, the land, yeah. So Adamah, I'm thinking is what it says in Hebrew. 10. No, it says Haaretz, the earth. The earth. That's what I was looking for. Because if it says the earth, even though at the moment it was talking about Israel, the fact that it says the earth in general, the same word that appears for the whole world, the earth, appears here. So it is like in the end times, the world will not be able to deal with the words of the two witnesses. They won't be able to take the words of the two witnesses. They won't be able to endure his words. They are pretty much saying, if what he's saying happens, the land will not make it. Him being a prophet, saying those words, he's about to destroy the world. They were seeing it like that. Since he's a prophet, he shouldn't speak like that because the world couldn't survive if that happens. As if he was just making things up along the way, or if he was just angry and said all these things when Yahweh was the one saying it because of their sins. So instead of them changing, repenting, to start doing good deeds, they instead would blame Amos, who is just the messenger, just like they will blame the two witnesses. And the earth is not able to endure all their words, as we read in Revelation 11. In Revelation 11, we see that people will hate them. These possess authority to shut the heavens so that no rain falls in the days of their prophecy, and they possess authority over the waters to turn them into blood and to smite the earth with all plagues as often as they wish. And when they have ended their witness, the beast coming out of the pit of the deep shall fight against them and overcome them and kill them. And their dead bodies lie in the street of the great city, which spiritually is called Sodom and Mizraim, where also our sovereign was impaled. And some of the peoples and tribes and tongues and nations see their dead bodies for 3.5 days and not allow their dead bodies to be placed into tombs. And those dwelling on the earth rejoice over them and exult. And they shall send gifts to each other, because these two prophets torture those dwelling on the earth. Torture those dwelling on the earth through their teaching, through their words, announcing the plagues that would happen. So they would blame the plagues on them, not understanding that it's because of themselves and their deeds. So they won't be able to endure their words, just like we see here regarding Amos. The earth is not able to endure all his words. For this is what Amos said, Jeroboam shall die by the sword, and Israel certainly be exiled from their own land. So he was just saying what was going to happen, as Yahweh said. That is what Jeroboam deserved, just like the beast will be killed spiritually by the sword of the witness like Moshe. Because when it comes to the physical, he will be thrown in the lake of fire alive. But why would he be thrown in the lake of fire alive, which is the second death? Because of the sword that the last will hold, that sword being Mashiach. For himself, Yahweh says that he won't destroy the enemy with weapons of this world, but with the spirit of his mouth, which, as we just saw in Revelation 2, is the sword that comes out of his mouth. And Amaziah said to Amos, "Go, you seer." Interesting. Go, you seer. Amos the seer. Vayomer Amaziah el Amos, Jose, lech, right? Zir, walk. So, seer. right? Which another term for prophet, a certain type of prophecy. So, and Amaziah said to Amos, go, you seer, flee to the land of Yahudah. Flee to the land of Yahudah and eat bread and prophesy there. So pretty much saying, you want to prophesy evil for somebody, go and prophesy for Yahudah, not for us. But do not prophesy anymore at Bethel, for it is the sovereign set apart place, and it is the house of the reign. How interesting that it is the sovereign set apart place, referring to the king. But remember that, like I said, Bethel means the house of the mighty one. The house of the mighty one was in Jerusalem. So Bethel, as a name, represents Jerusalem, where we had, well, where the people had the house of Yahweh, the sovereign set apart place. Just like the two witnesses will be prophesying about the enemy and about his people and about the land that he is keeping and about other things that people will see as blasphemous because they do not understand. Like for instance, if we say that God is Satan, they would claim that is blasphemous because they do not understand what we're saying, right? That God is the mighty one of fortune, as we see in Isaiah 65:11, and therefore that is Satan. God is Satan, but they don't understand scriptures, they don't read scriptures. So we cannot just say it like that because they would think it's blasphemous. But do not prophesy anymore at Bethel, for it is the sovereign set apart place, and it is the house of the reign. And Amos answered and said to Amaziah, I am not a prophet, nor am I a son of a prophet, for I am a herdsman and a grower of sycamore figs. This is very interesting because this once again confirms that Amos represents the last, that all his prophecy represents the end times. For if we go to Zechariah, in Zechariah, look at this I'll read from 4. And it shall be in that day that every prophet will be ashamed of his vision when he prophesies. In that day refers to the end of times. That they will not wear a robe of coarse hair to deceive, like, for instance, Eliyahu that would wear camel's hair. But he will say, I am no prophet. I am a farmer. So the true prophet will not claim to be a prophet. False prophets, they claim to be prophets, right? So the true prophet will say, I am no prophet. I am a farmer, which at the end, as an allegory, allegorically, it is the same because the prophet prepares the land. The people were made from the soil. The prophet prepares the people for what Yahweh is bringing them, for what Yahweh has for them. Just like the farmer prepares the land to give fruit for the harvest, the two witnesses will prepare the world for the harvest of Revelation 14. I am no prophet, I am a farmer, for a man taught me to keep cattle from my youth. And one will say to him, what are these wounds between your arms? Here you see there's a comment, and we look down, it says hands. What are these wounds between your hands or in your hands? Then he will answer, those with which I was wounded in the house of my friends. So this verse refers to the coming of the prophet like Moshe, who won't claim to be a prophet, which is the second manifestation of Yahweh on this earth. For the first time, he came to his friends and they nailed him to a cross. And that's why he has wounds in his hands, through his hands. So hopefully that's clear. Now let me go to Amos. And Amos answered and said to Amaziah, I am not a prophet, nor am I a son of a prophet. This is very interesting as well, because The same was the case for Elishua. Eliyahu, well, Yahweh chose Elishua. Yahweh told Eliyahu, go and anoint Elishua as your substitute, right? As your successor. And Elishua received the double portion of the spirit of Eliyahu. But Elishua was not a son of prophet. He was not a son of prophets. He was a son of farmers. Remember that Elishua was working the land. He had the oxen, and then he killed them and cooked them to give it to everybody when he was chosen as the next prophet. Hopefully that's understood. So we see Elishua connected to Amos, for they are both a representation of the last, who comes not as the people think of a prophet, like the way the people think of a prophet, but as Yahweh wants to do things through whom he chooses, and that's it. Just like Elishua was working the land, he was chosen as a prophet because the sons of the prophets were not behaving like prophets. So he chose somebody that was not a prophet, who would do it for the love of Yahweh and not for the title, not for the position, but for the good of the people. So Elishua, just like Eliyahu and Elishua, can be seen as the first and the last. Eliyahu and Elishua, we get Yahushua, who said Eli, Eli, right? So Eliyahu and Elishua represent the first and the last manifestation of Yahweh on this earth as Yahushua, the mighty one. So two mighty ones, Eli, Eli, first and last, who become one in Yahushua. Obviously in Yahweh through Yahushua, through what Yahushua did. So Amos and Elishua are alike. They were not children of prophets, yet Yahweh chose them as prophets. They were preparing the land, they were working the land, and that's why they would be able to work the people, because the people were made from the land, and there is a harvest in the end times. He needs to be a pastor of sheep and also of cattle. I am not a prophet, nor am I a son of a prophet, for I am a herdsman. Herdsman, right? He takes care of the herds. And a grower of sycamore figs. Remember that the figs represent deeds. Yahushua cursed the fig tree because it did not have fruits, but it did have leaves that represent the works of the flesh. The figs, the works of the spirit, the true works. Also, some connect the figs to the fruit of knowledge, others to the fruit of life. Either way, for I am a herdsman and a grower of the sycamore figs. He was sent to grow good deeds from the people of Yahudah, represented by the fig tree, the Yahudim. The figs, good deeds, the true fulfillment of the commandments, not the false fulfillment of the commandments as commandments of men, which are represented by the leaves. Reason why Yahushua cursed the fig tree that had only a bunch of leaves. And a herdsman, because he comes as the good shepherd, but not only for the few as the sheep, but also for the many as the cows. So herdsman. But Yahweh took me from behind the flock. This is amazing, because this is also said by David. David was taken from behind the flock, for he was shepherding, pasturing his sheep. So I am not a prophet, nor am I a son of a prophet, connects him to Elishua, and they are both representations of the last in that key point that is mentioned in this verse. For I am a herdsman as well, connected to the last, and a grower of sycamore figs to the last, for he will grow the 144,000 who will be his spiritual children. Yahushua came and there was no figs. The last comes to fix that, right? To get figs from the chosen few. But Yahweh took me from behind the flock, like David, like the king, King David. And Yahweh said to me, go prophesy to my people Israel. So Amos is saying, I'm not a prophet. That's not what I do. Yahweh just told me to say this. I'm saying it. That's all. I am not like the prophets you think you know, or like those who claim to be prophets. I was doing my thing. Yahweh called me to say something and I said it. So Yahweh took me from behind the flock, right? Him being humble. And Yahweh said to me, go prophesy to my people Israel. And now hear the word of Yahweh. It's beautiful. So he doesn't back down. He remains humble and he comes back with more. And now hear the word of Yahweh. You are saying, do not prophesy against Israel, right? Because that's what he was saying. Amatziyah. Go and prophesy against Yahudah, not against Israel. And now hear the word of Yahweh. You are saying, do not prophesy against Israel, and do not drop words against the house of Yitzhak. Against the house of Yitzhak. Once again, written in the same way. And let me see in the concordance real quick how that appears. 16, Yitzhak, Yishhak. It's interesting. So Yishhak, you see, in this case, they do put it with the shin, Yish. And it comes from Shachatzima, toward the heights. Shachatzima. So look at this. Yishhak. They're translating it as he laughs, because that's the name Yitzhak. It appears 4 times in scriptures. 2 of those in Amos, 1 in Jeremiah, 1 in Psalms. Which covenant he made with Abraham and his oath unto Yitzhak. Then Jeremiah 33:26, Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. Those are the 4 times that it appears with a letter Shin. The other times it appears with a Sadeh. But you see how in this case with the letter Shin is making reference to this word, Shachatzima, which is the tower, the heights. Come from Shachatz, which means dignity, pride, majestic wild beasts. So pride, dignity, elation, pride. So Yahweh is using this name Yishhak to make reference to those who came from Yishhak, from Yitzhak, but became prideful and made high places. Shachatzimah, and made high places. Remember how he was saying, I will destroy the high places of Yishhak? So the changing of the tzadeh for a shin would be to make reference to those high places that they built to go against Yahweh. So instead of being joyful as Yitzhak, which means he will laugh, they were prideful as Yishhak would make reference to. And they made high places. So I hope that's clear. This is the Sadeh, just in case people are wondering what's that word. I mean, that letter. And just so that you see, I'll write it like it appears there. Yishhak. You see, they say will play. But if I change it for a Sadeh, Yitzhak. They don't write it like they normally write it. That's another deal. Because they normally write it as Isaac, of course. So, and now hear the word of Yahweh. You are saying, do not prophesy against Israel and do not drop words against the house of Yishhak. Therefore, thus said Yahweh, your wife shall become a whore in the city. And look, because that confirms who Amatziyah represents. Amatziyah represents the false prophet, because his wife, his church, is the whore of Babylon. The false prophets comes from the whore of Babylon. The false prophet will talk to the beast as Jeroboam in order for them to kill the two witnesses, one of which is represented by Amos. Therefore, thus said Yahweh, your wife shall become a whore in the city, and your sons and daughters, those of the church, fall by the sword. Spiritually, the word of Yahweh; physically, the sword of the beast. And your land be divided by a measuring line. Your land be divided by a measuring line, like the plumb line, like the measuring rod of Revelation 11. And you die in a defiled land, and Israel shall certainly be exiled from its land. Pretty much saying there's nothing you guys can do about it. Even if you kill me, it will happen. It's just going to happen. So here that verse ends.